All right, a big shout out first to all of the family and consumer science teachers out there who have been kind enough to share all of their wonderful lesson resources with all of us so that we can all teach rigorous instruction and make it fun and exciting for our students. So another thing that is found on my Google Advanced Child Care Drive are going to be a couple of sites that you might not be aware of. We all know, I believe, of the familyconsumersciences.com website, but this site is very similar to that. It's a link to Facebook, and you can click this and ask to join, and it's specifically related to early childhood. I'm just kind of finding out about this, so you all may have already known about it, but it's been a big help for me in preparing lessons this summer. The second site here is again for the Best Care Connected and Guiding Children Successfully that I mentioned in my first Zoom meeting when we were talking about certification opportunities. NEPRIS, so what I've done here is linked lessons that I have found through these wonderful sites on here, and then if you go to my drive, or excuse me, each folder, a lot of those are lessons that I've come up with. So these are all lessons that I've found and used. Some of them are going to be new to me, but you can go there and they're linked to the performance indicator under the standards. So you can see that that page might be of some help to quickly get you going on fun and exciting lessons for students. The next piece of information that might be helpful for you would be, I've just taken all of the standards and performance indicators and put them in a different format. This is going to help me personally because this is my year to have my formal evaluation with tests, and so I've got to make sure that I have evidence of learning. And so I thought, well, if I've got to do it, why not make sure that my students understand you know, why I'm choosing the topics that I'm covering and how they can learn to show evidence of learning. So this is kind of a long document. It's about 16 pages, but the reason it's set up that way is my plan is if I'm going to be with them in the classroom, I will print each standard as we're covering it. The student can put the date that we covered the standard and what activity we did, if we did a certification, if we watched a video and they did a reflection, if we did a group activity, they can put that information over to the side. And then this will be another good way when I get ready to take up their work for grading, they will know what they're supposed to turn in because that piece of evidence will be there. So then I'm going to quickly, I'm not going to hit every unit, but I'm going to quickly look at some lessons that have been my favorite for students and then a few new ones that I'm thinking about incorporating. So if we look first, one thing I want to mention, I talked to you about this folder having the Arkansas Minimum Licensing Standards handbooks, but I didn't really mention the Better Beginning Quality Rating Handbook. This is not every center will be using these, but most Head Start centers, most ABC centers are using this quality rating handbook. There are 3 levels that licensed facilities can choose to meet qualifications, and of course the higher the level, the more rigorous the program is. Therefore, those are going to be the sites that parents we want to share should be looking for when they're looking for childcare. So that's another activity that you could do with your students, is to have them compare, put them into teams, have them compare different components of those. So I just wanted to mention that is what is there. So if I had to pick some of my favorite or lessons, because my students seem to be so intrigued with them, one of them I found on familyconsumersciences.com, and it is the nursery rhyme activity, which I use in Unit 2 when we're talking about actually performance indicator 2.3, when we're talking about developmentally appropriate curriculum. And the reason I look at this is because it's interesting to me. I grew up with nursery rhymes, but in today's times, a lot of our students do not really know about nursery rhymes. So, yep, there's the link that I found it. And so what I did is set up this activity so that it could either be, you know, in a regular classroom setting, or I could easily put this on for a distance learning activity on Google Classroom. And so there is a great video out there called Rhymers or Readers, and I forget the lady's name, but she spends quite a bit of time talking about the importance of nursery rhymes and how it really plays into reading comprehension. So the first step is for the students to watch the video, and then there's a reflection. And if we're in class, we're going to discuss it. If we're on Google Classroom doing things, they can do a Google Classroom response. And then it's just a lot of really fun activities. Basically, one of the things that they can do, I'll show you some of the student responses here. They can pretend that they are in their classroom, and they are going to use a chosen nursery rhyme, and they are going to make a bulletin board about that, and then they're going to begin to start thinking about what are some lessons that I can do around this particular nursery rhyme. And then, of course, maybe even going out and locating books that kind of relate to the nursery rhyme. But part of the original lesson that was on Family Consumer Sciences was really good because it had trivia questions related to nursery rhymes. And then one of the things that they were also supposed to do is to look up the history behind the nursery rhyme. Where did it come from? And some of them are, you know, quite interesting to the students as far as where they came from. So this is one of those, you know, end of the week activities that I can assign on maybe a Thursday and give them a Friday to work in class, and then tell them, you know, maybe a few early into the following week it's due. Send them back to your, for me in my sewing lab, I have a lot of arts and crafts activity binders, and so they can go back and find whatever papers and stickers and things that they want to help them make it very creative. And this is an opportune time for you to start discussing about your expectations of the quality of work that they're going to give to you. You know, we want things to look, you know, very eye appealing. So this is one of those first activities where they can start looking into those particular things. So all of the things that you will use for that activity are found there. Then I'm going to slip over to standard 4. And for this particular standard 4.1, it's about positive characteristics of an effective caregiver. So one of the things that I found, I actually use some of the lesson plans found on the national website. And so these are all linked here. There's actually more than one lesson here, but there was a lesson that I do in Family and Consumer Science about designing an FCCLA advisor. And I thought, well, that would kind of be cool if they designed an early child care teacher, because they have to talk about the characteristics. And so the characteristics of an effective caregiver. So I thought that you could turn that activity into, instead of just discussing and listing characteristics, it might be fun to, again, bring out their creativity. Now, this particular picture is not related to the characteristics of a early childhood educator, but I thought we could use it as a visual to help them get ready for this. So this is one that an activity that can actually also be used in standard 8 when we talk about helping special needs students. And it's called I'm a Sensational Kid. And if you notice here, they're using the body parts of the children, and they are looking at some difficulties that they have. This little girl always walks on her tiptoes. Things that they like or dislike. I hate being tickled or cuddled. I have selective hearing. So even though we're going to look at positive characteristics, what this little activity is about is showing children is that even if they have some difficult situations in their life, they're still sensational. But I show this just as a visual to get them ready for the activity. And so I'll show you the student samples and then discuss briefly some other information that I find out from these samples. So I just pulled some of my better samples. Again, I send them back to after we talk about the developing responsibilities and characteristics of effective caregivers. This has always been one of my favorite examples here. And I tell them you have to use appropriate body parts and organs to show, positive characteristics or skills that someone needs to exhibit in order to do good in working with children in a variety of ways. So I thought they were very creative. I sent them back to the back and said, look through the bins and see what you can find to design your child. Now, I bring up this one because although these two guys were giving me a little bit of problems with wanting to show their creativity, I knew they had it in them, and lo and behold, they did a great job. They asked could they go into the kitchen and see what they could find there, and they ran across some pastas that they could use, and then they found felt. So I was really impressed with their creativity of their child drawing. But the reason I put this one in here is because this activity, I realized, gives me an idea of what my students are thinking about as far as what are some things that they're going to be displaying when they go down to mentor under a classroom teacher. And so you notice they have hugging and kissing. And so this is a good opportunity for me to begin to discuss with my students that when we get ready to go down to labs, that there's going to be appropriate types of positive response to children, and that we can't always exhibit the same responses that we do with our close friends and family, such as, grabbing my niece and giving her a big old hug and kiss. Professionally, when I'm working with children, I can't display affection in that same way. So it was a good opportunity for me to realize, oh yeah, we need to have this discussion. And although hugs and kisses are okay, in some instances in a professional lab setting, that's not going to be the case. So just wanted to share that fun activity that the students really tend to enjoy doing. Another one that is in Unit 4 is promoting children's success. And again, I have all of the information there, but this is actually a website that came from Vanderbilt College in the early childhood program. And I began using it in 2013, but it is still very relevant. I'm going to quickly click on the site so that you can see it. Hopefully it'll come up here in just a moment as I'm talking about it. I choose to look at the preschool program. I'm just going to click back out of there and we'll try that in a second. The preschool modules, but there are infant and toddler modules as well. And what I do here is first I have all of the activities that you can do. There's a teacher note page that tells you what activities you can do with this particular module. And this module works well, not only in Unit 4, but also in Unit 6. And that's why I have teacher notes to tell which specific parts of the module work better in this module versus Unit 6 standards. But back to, let's see if I can pull that back up. Back to this, oh, I thought I had it. Here we go. I think I've got this. All right, here's the website. So again, the information comes from 2013, but I feel very confident that you would still enjoy having the students work through these modules today, because the information is very relevant. And again, you can choose, if you look over here, infant, toddler, pre-K, you're just going to have to look at your particular lab setting, and you might even have some students do preschool, some do infant, toddler, you know, depending on what area that they're going to choose. I'm trying to find, there's one other piece of information I wanted to show you there. Here is an example of the, this is the presenter script. So you could actually preview this ahead of time so you know what you're going to be discussing. And then another activity that you can do, I think I have this set up in Unit 6, is you can actually divide the students up using the different modules, because for instance, this particular site has 4 modules within just preschool. And that way you could team your students and let them draw sticks to decide who's going to cover. Like I cover module 1, and then they will have to decide which team is going to cover the other modules. And then there's tons of, you know, activities within each one. And again, if you have large classes, if you have more than one child care guidance class, you could even have the training modules vary from age groups. So that is something that I've used in the past, and it works really well. And it gives the students an opportunity to learn to teach in front of their fellow classmates, and so that they're becoming more comfortable to speak in front of others. All right, moving along to Unit 6. This unit, we know, is dealing with promoting children's success. And so again, with that unit that we just had, there are some additional units that you can look at in that site that I was just showing you. But one of the fun activities that my students really enjoy is when we look at student bullying, and we talk about, do you really realize how early student bullying and labeling can happen? So I don't know if you're familiar with this cute little book, Chrysanthemum. If not, I have the book in my classroom and I read it to them first, and then we have a discussion about, did anybody pick up on, you know, any bullying that was going on? Some of them get the bullying that happens right off the bat. Basically what happens is this little mouse has this lovely name, Chrysanthemum, and she loves it until she enters school, and then she's made fun of. And so then the rest of the story is how sad she is and how she loses her confidence. This is also an online story of it. The students like to look at that as well. But the end of the book turns out great, because their preschool teacher is with child, and she leaves for maternity leave, has the child leaves for maternity leave, and then when she comes back, she brings her new baby to visit, and lo and behold, the new baby has been named Chrysanthemum. So now all of a sudden Chrysanthemum loves her name again, and all of the other students are jealous of her name, and they, you know, Chrysanthemum becomes the most popular student. So there's the lesson about, you know, anti-bullying and how early it can happen and how we have to be aware of what little children are saying. But then another type of lesson that you can pull from this is, again, getting them ready for building their own lessons. So I have found some lesson plans that relate to, literacy and from preschool and kindergarten. And so they can share these with their mentor teacher. And hopefully the teacher might let them, read the book, have discussions either about how we shouldn't be mean, and we shouldn't make fun of people. How does it make us feel? But then this also allows them to show the teacher, their mentor teacher, that they are aware of, literacy activities that can go along with this. And so they might get the opportunity to teach some skills to their little preschool or school age students that they're working with. So they enjoy that activity. This is a brand new one that I've made that also fits under standard 6.3 specifically. And it is related to stress and how stress can have an effect on the brain. Now, when I made this activity up, I was specifically thinking about, what if we are not in the classroom? It's going to work in the classroom, great, but I wanted to make sure that it's going to be one of those lessons that they can learn something new and articulate through distance learning. So the information that I've given, I think that I've worked this out where it could be a week-long project. So at first they're going to look at, have they ever even thought about how stress has an effect on brain development? And basically there is a website known as the Adverse Childhood Experience, ACEs website, and I've got that in the teacher notes. And this is where I got all of this wonderful graph information, and it's a great website to use. But so we spend a little bit of time talking about, okay, so a child has some dysfunctions. Did we really realize that that can have a lifelong effect on them? So first, there is a video to watch. This is all through the CDC. And through that video, I think I have a little reflection that they have to write about. And then there is an article about adverse childhood experience prevention. And so I have them look at that resource article. And in that article, it talks about strategies. They're actually called technical package strategies. And I went ahead and listed them. Whoops. Looks like I'm going to, there they are. Here's the strategies that they can use. And so I asked them to think about what is a strategy that they think sounds like a great idea to them if they were working with a child that was dealing with stress as mentioned above. So that all can happen on day one. And then day two, they start looking, can these stresses have a lasting impact on moving into someone's adult life? So we look at this visual and talk about it if we're in class. Maybe if we're not in class, we can look at it through a Zoom meeting. And then there is a little, what they call an ACE score test, which will score the level of stress that you have had. Now, I understand that some students would feel very uneasy to, maybe not to take the test, but to share that. So I do not mention anywhere that they have to share their score. And I even say, if you're uncomfortable to take the quiz, simply look at the questions that make up the quiz to better understand how these stressors can affect them. And then here's a visual showing that that way they can compare. Let's say they took it and they scored a 3. Okay, they see that their no different than 9.5% of other people who have taken this stress score test, and they see it kind of relates them to other people. How do they fare against others? And then the second part of that is think of themselves or someone that they care deeply for and consider the effects of adverse childhood experiences, and list, without naming this person, list some specific ways in which the student can help that loved one overcome those past stressors. And I'm sorry, this is where they can look at those ways to help them. Okay, so now we're probably on maybe Wednesday. And so then the next activity is recognizing just how these adverse childhood experiences can affect our lives if we allow them to. And we're going to spend some time talking about, you know, we can wallow in self-affliction, or we can decide that we're going to change a pattern. And we might need some outside help with that, but we have to be willing to be the one that breaks the cycle. So according to the adverse childhood experience study, the rougher your childhood, the more likely your score is going to be high, and therefore it's going to cause some definite health problems. So we can look at the study showed that a lot of times these very stressful early childhood experience can even, unfortunately, cause early death among people. So then you can look here at some of the visuals. Again, I did not make these are off of the Violence Prevention CDC website. And then finally, the last day, we're going to figure out exactly what can we really do about this, because we all have a role. If we are deciding that we're going to work with children, we have a responsibility and a role to help in preventing these stresses as much as we can. And if we can't prevent them, then how can we help children learn to overcome them? And there are 2 trainings that they can take. And so it's called an introductory training. And I stress that there's a lot of talk about psychology in the little modules. There's a lot of looking at the health of the person. So these are going to be great modules for those child care students in your classroom that are wanting to get a psychology degree, go into social work, go into the health field. So again, you're showing them that you're not just totally focusing on teacher roles. So anyway, I think this could end up being a year-long course. I have not used it, so I'm positive there will be some things that I need to adjust, but I hope to go through everything myself this summer, and if there's anything I need to change, it will happen before you decide to use this. Hopefully that will work out great. And then one other thing that I want to talk about is Unit 7. I'm running out of time. So Unit 7 is going to be on looking at health and safety of children. So really that last activity in Standard 6 could also work in Standard 7. One thing I don't think that I've mentioned to you before is that whenever in my units, whenever you see things related to guiding children successfully or best care connected, I have linked any certificates that might work for students to each of the standards. And I do not necessarily have every single student in child care guidance to complete every single certification. I understand that I've got to sell the students to why they want to spend that extra time on that certification, more so than just a letter grade. But I want to show them how getting this extra training is hopefully going to help their efforts either in college or in the workforce. So with this particular one, there's a lesson on safety first in child care. So this is just a 1-hour module, and it would give them some additional training in that area. This is also a great time to talk about advocacy. You know, when we work in a field with children, we have to be an advocate for them. So I've looked at advocacy centers in Arkansas, and I've put a link to those throughout the state that I found. And so maybe you could divide those advocacy centers up. You could even turn that into a community service project where maybe they contacted each of the centers, or maybe a advocacy center close to where you teach, and call them up and find out what are some ways that we can be a community support, and that will give them some new insights into careers that they might not have thought about. Another one that a good friend of mine, Jamie Lofton, shared. Now, she said to be sure and tell as well that she is just like me, appreciates someone had shared this while we were out this spring. And this is one of the standard units that we have to talk about, the minimum licensing handbook. And so this is an activity where they have to go to the Department of Human Services, and they look at the Division of Child Care and Early Childhood Education, and then they have to read the article about what does the Division of Child Care say in relation to child care centers and COVID. Now, you notice here that she did this activity for the month of April, so obviously you would change that, but I feel like we're going to be seeing some different standards, so this could be another way to get them to understand responsibilities of child care directors and knowing the importance of keeping children safe. So thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. And then I think one other one, this is also, I found this, which is, this is probably where many people do their CPR training. And so this is a skills check for CPR training so that the students can recognize what they can and can't do, what they need help with. So I thought that would be something that would be helpful. I just want to thank everybody for sharing your activities. And if you ever have any questions, do not hesitate to email me. Thank you for your time.